you look at the Pittsburgh Pirates. To me, they're one of those dangerous teams because I love their lineup. I love the fact that they're a young team, but yet they have that playoff experience. And then ultimately you look at the St. Louis Cardinals. Every time you turn around, the Cardinals are right there in the Central. Out of those two teams right now, if we're just sitting here hanging out talking at the bar, who would be your pick right now out of those two teams to possibly represent the NL in the World Series?
I still think the Cardinals are the best overall, maybe in the National League. I mean, their record certainly says so. And the fact is that if they get Adam Wainwright back and he can go into the bullpen, it just gives them almost an unfair weapon, considering how they've been able to weather the storm this year with all the injuries, but they're getting Matt Adams back and Matt Holliday back. And when you can do that, that's just a complete team. I think that the one thing that Cardinals fans have to worry about is if Yadier Molina isn't 100%. He's such a big cog in that team and such an important person both on the field and in the clubhouse. That's where the tables could turn. I don't think the Cardinals certainly are invincible, but if they do maybe have an Achilles heel, it would be if Molina's not available.
When the Phillies traded, when Chase Utley went to the Dodgers, and you have Jimmy Rollins obviously with the Dodgers, two ex-Phillies, I said that if Chase Utley gives them one or two big at-bats in the postseason, the move paid off. I mean, last night he hits the home run, but it just shows you that sometimes you have to look beyond stats when you look at guys like Utley and Rollins. I mean, what have they meant to the Dodgers?
I think they give them that stability, and I'm really will be interested to see what the Dodgers do with their playoff roster, because they have so many guys that they can have, especially in the infield. Now that you do have Chase Utley in there, but Corey Seager has been off the charts impressive in his brief time. I think they've got to keep him on the playoff roster. And then, what do you do? Justin Turner. What do you do with Jimmy Rollins? All of those guys, Howie Kendrick. I mean, they have so many players right now, and it's masked by the fact that the rosters are expanded. When they have to cut down to 25, that's going to be really interesting, and I think they're going to be some surprises for the people who get left off of that roster just because they can't keep them all.
The one thing, too, about the Dodgers, sometimes when their offense goes south, it goes south. I mean, last night, I think through 7, they managed one hit off Anderson and Delgado. So, again, they're still a playoff team that streaky in that sense, which I think you mentioned with the lineup and, of course, the roster spots. It makes it a little more tougher on Mattingly going forward. I want to get your thoughts before we move to Yogi Berra and in the AL. We saw that big series between the Yankees and the Toronto Blue Jays. I mean, I think it's great for baseball, especially in Canada with Toronto, the way they're playing. You had the big home run the other night for Bird for the Yankees, and it kind of brings to mind, like, let's not get too carried away with this young kid, because I think of guys like Greg Jeffries, Kevin Moss, but it's a nice bat for the Yankees to have in the lineup. I guess the only concern I have with the Yankees is if their pitching goes south, then I don't care who they have top to bottom 1 to 9. They're not going to win a lot of ball games, and they're going to be bounced early.
No, I agree. I don't think they're built for postseason success when you've got Masahiro Tanaka as your number one guy, but who else follows him? I mean, they had 3 essentially inexperienced rookie pitchers going in that. Nova, I guess, is a veteran, but Luis Severino and Adam Warren going in that Toronto series. That's the best they could do. That's all they had in such an important series this late in the year. I just don't think the pitching holds up for them. And although the back end of the bullpen is great, they've relied on Dylan Betances and Andrew Miller so often and have ridden them really hard. I think it's going to be tough for the Yankees pitching to hold up in the postseason for however long they're in it.
And that series, especially the game the other night, it felt like it was a postseason game, like it had playoff atmosphere. I mean, I think that's great for Toronto because, again, that lineup, that's a scary lineup. I mean, you have to deal with guys from top to bottom that it kind of reminded me last year when the Royals were even having guys when they weren't playing small ball, guys coming off the bench with some big hits. I look at Toronto, and I'm not going to say it resembles Kansas City's run last year, but you have guys that, when you look at that lineup, there's really not a lot of holes.
It kind of looks like that team of destiny. It has that kind of feel. I see what you're saying, even though the Royals offense and the Blue Jays offense couldn't be any more different than each other because of the way that they go about things. But yeah, Toronto, just everything is working for them offensively. And in the playoffs, you get to a point where good pitching can stop good hitting. We've seen that happen before. But looking up and down that lineup from Ben Revere at the top through Russell Martin and Justin Smoke and the big guys in the middle, you just don't see, at least to me, it seems really hard to figure out how anybody would be able to shut that offense down.
In a couple minutes with Steve Gardner from USA Today, covers baseball, does a great job. Kind enough to join us on a Thursday edition of the Warm-Up. Rich Quinones here, Peachy. We'll take you up to 2 o'clock, again inside Tropicana Chickies and Pete's. Again, got about a half an hour to play with. I want to switch gears a little bit. The passing of Yogi Berra, and it really is amazing. You know me, I'm a big history guy, and I always like to look at numbers and with past players and generational players and great players. I mean, forget about him being a 3-time MVP. You could have actually argued. I mean, the 1 year Mantle had that great year in '56, but there were a couple other times that he could have been right there. He finished second place a ton of times. But how about Yogi Berra and just the player himself, for being his size, for being a catcher, and for those power numbers that he put up? I mean, what were your thoughts on Yogi?
It just we focus so much on the personality and what a great ambassador for baseball, number one, and what a great spokesperson for the Yankees and a real all-time great in so many facets. But yeah, it kind of gets overlooked what a Hall of Fame player he was, because everything else kind of overshadows it. But you look at Yogi Berra, more World Series rings than anybody else. Those 3 MVPs you were talking about, and the fact that he struck out so few times. You look at today's high strikeout. There were just so many stats that were floating around about how Yogi struck out. In his entire career, struck out just over 400 times. That's 2 seasons for Mark Reynolds, and guys like that. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
And the fact that he was so consistent and, just sort of found his way into that Yankees lineup kind of by mistake, and Casey Stengel just having some faith in him because he wasn't highly sought after. Joe Garagiola was signed first when both of them went to an open tryout. And the St. Louis Cardinals signed Joe Garagiola and said, Yogi, you're not good enough, and told him to take a hike. It's just the perseverance that he had to be able to stick with it and just continue to work at his craft and get better and better and better. Says so much about the man himself.
How about the postseason performance? I mean, the numbers are so gaudy. The hits, the games played, the home runs. I mean, 10 RBI in one postseason. I think I don't have it right in front of me if memory serves me correct. I know he had 2 home runs in a Game 7 when the Yankees beat the Brooklyn Dodgers, and I don't have the year in front of me, and I'm kicking myself. But I mean, talk about a clutch player in the postseason. I mean, certainly a clutch player.
Yeah, I think 55 might have been that year. Yeah, he had. Or 55 or 56, one of those. They won in 56, lost to the Dodgers in 55.
Yes.
But yeah, it's just so clutch, and everybody to a man said what a great teammate he is, and I know when this age of sabermetrics and measuring things of what guys do on the field, Yogi was one of those guys that it's impossible to measure what he did off the field and how he helped the team in that regard. And you could see it when you go to spring training and go into the Yankees clubhouse. Everything stopped when Yogi walked in the place. Even in his final few years, it's just amazing to see the respect that he had throughout the game, and especially with the Yankees.
Before I let you out of here, the Phils take the interim tag off Pete Mackinnon. And, here's a guy who was an interim manager, a guy that's been around baseball, obviously, and paid some dues. I'm not surprised that they made him, they named him the manager, and he's got that club option for 2016. So he's not going anywhere for a while. He signed through 2016. I guess I was a little surprised because when you have such overhaul and you know you're going to be moving around a lot of players, you've got a lot of young players, you're trying to replenish that farm system. You already brought in Andy McPhail. I thought maybe they would wait it out a little bit, especially, look, I was shocked that they fired Ruben Amaro Jr. during, about a month to go in the season. But any thoughts on just taking that tag away and having Pete now the new Phil's skipper?
Well, I think what you need to do, you need to have at least a little continuity. And because the Phils still need to hire a general manager, I don't think they could give him a long-term contract, talking about McCannon, because the new GM comes in, he's going to have, his preferences and everything is going to shape the entire organization. So if McCannon's not his guy, then you don't want to have the Phillies on the hook for that for 2 and 3 years. So I think the contract length is appropriate, and I think the option for next year at least gives some incentive for both parties to work together. So I think that's appropriate. And everywhere McCannon has been, I mean, where he's had interim managing jobs, he's had the respect of his players. I think I don't know of anybody that said a bad word or had anything negative to say about the job that he does, and it's worth giving him a shot to see what he can do with the team next year. And if things work out, everything's in place to continue with it, and if it doesn't, it's not an expensive parting.
No, and I'll say this in closing, that's a great point you bring up. It's a valid point too, because the Philly players did not, Ryan Sandberg was not able to garner their respect, and he had that locker room that there wasn't a divide, but there were certainly players that just didn't believe in him. So the fact that you have a guy who can get the respect of players everywhere that he's gone, especially with a young team, a franchise in transition, and I don't want to say disarray, but in transition, I think is a fair word, then I think that bodes well for the Phillies, and we'll see how it plays out. Always a pleasure, my friend. I appreciate the insight. Have a good weekend. Enjoy the games. We'll talk next week.
Sounds great. Talk to you later, Reg.
All right, you got it. Steve Garner does a great job with USA Today covering baseball.